And I want to turn to a passage in 1 Samuel and chapter 1. We read of this woman whose name was Hannah, and the Lord has answered my prayer, which I asked of him. So, what shall I do when the Lord has answered my prayer? I will dedicate him, verse 28, to the Lord. As long as he lives, he shall be dedicated to the Lord. He's dedicated to God for life. And Samuel, that little boy, worshipped the Lord there. What a wonderful example of a mother in the Old Testament who recognized this is God's gift. I'll give it back to the Lord. And I want to encourage all of us who are parents here. If you have never done it, not too late to do it now. To say, Lord, not one of my children, but all of my children. I want them to live for you. I want them to fulfill that particular task that you have for them in the body of Christ. That may not be full-time Christian work. In fact, if God calls you to be a teacher and you become a full-time Christian worker, you're living in disobedience. And I believe there are lots of Christians who are living in disobedience by going into full-time Christian work or being missionaries when God never called them. You can't do what you feel like doing. And vice versa, it's true as well. If God called you to be a missionary and you become a teacher or an engineer or a doctor, you're living in disobedience too. The thing to recognize is that your children, if you bring them up to fear God and to love the Lord, there's a particular place in the body. I don't know where it is, but there is a place in the body of Christ for them. And they must find that place. I think of it like a big jigsaw puzzle. Supposing you have a big jigsaw puzzle and a full size of Jesus, body of Jesus, face all the way to the feet. That's the body of Christ. And each piece can fit in only in one place. You know how jigsaw puzzles are. You can't take one piece and put it wherever you like. You have to put it only in one place. It doesn't fit anywhere else. If you wanted to fit somewhere else, you have to cut it and do all types of things, and there'll be a blank in that body because you did that. We're not foolish when it comes to doing jigsaw puzzles, but when it comes to the body of Christ, many of us don't seem to be so eager to find, where is my place here? We're always trying to put ourselves in somebody else's place. What if Jesus says, you got to be in my feet and not on my face? Are you happy to be a piece on the puzzle down there instead of up here? This is the way you'll fulfill your ministry. We must never try to imitate another person. That's like cutting your piece of the jigsaw puzzle into the same shape of somebody else's. Then you won't fit anywhere. But if you keep it the way it was, there's a particular place in that puzzle where it'll fit. It's very true. The body of Christ is like that. There's a particular place for each of us and for our children. We must believe that. And it takes many years to discover that. It took me maybe 15, 20 years after I was born again before I realized what my ministry really was. It'll take time, but if you train up our children in the way they should go, the fathers discipline them, instruct them in the ways of the Lord, then the mothers, like Timothy's mother, she imparted faith to her little son. Faith is more than Bible knowledge. It's good to give our children Bible knowledge. But how do you think Timothy got faith? Paul says to Timothy, that faith which you got from your mother. How did Timothy get faith from his mother? It must have been in different situations at home where things went wrong, like it can happen in all of our homes and does happen. And Timothy saw his mother not worked up and upset and blaming people and calm. Okay, something's happened. We didn't expect it to happen. But God is sovereign. He'll take care of it. He'll do something. So many times we worry about things which 2,000 years from now we will not even give another thought to. we'll wonder, why in the world did I worry 2,000 years ago on earth about that silly little thing which has no value now? Remember that. It has value only now, not in the future. Little children are worried about things that happen right now. But we live in eternity. And so we must impart faith, mothers especially, because they are with their children most of the time. And Hannah, more than her husband, imparted this faith. And it says every year she would go up and, speak to her son and impart her faith to her. And the result was he grew up so different from the other boys of the high priest Eli. She was a poor woman. The high priest Eli was a very privileged man. The high priest was the most important person in Israel before they had a king. And his sons, Eli's sons, were very privileged. And they were corrupt. Most rich, privileged people's children are corrupt because they have position and honor and money. And Hannah was poor, brought up her children with poverty and struggle, and taught Samuel some values in those early days. The result was he must have seen Eli's children also growing up close to where he lived, because he lived in the same house almost as Eli. He saw those other boys and he was not affected by them, even though his mother was not with him. It's a tremendous testimony. Will you be able to send your little boy to some other place to live in a home where there are a couple of really evil boys growing up and your boy remains pure? I'll take my hats off to you as a mother and father if you did that. That's the work that Hannah did. That Samuel was not at all influenced by the boys living in that same home, the sons of Eli who were corrupt. It's a wonderful testimony. It shows how much we can put into the heart and mind of a child by prayer and instruction, even by the time they are 5 or 6 years old. That's how we got to start very early. In the first 7 years, we can impart so much to them that they'll almost carry those values for life. And a lot depends on the mother. I'll tell you why. Because Samuel grew up and he was a very godly man. He was the most godly man in Israel and probably the most godly man in the world at that time, I'm sure. But I want you to turn to 1 Samuel 8 and verse 1. Samuel was old, and he appointed his sons judges over Israel. Their names were Joel and Abijah. Verse 3, his sons did not walk in his ways, but turned aside to take bribes and corrupted justice. Judges were to judge between people just like the high court judges here, and these sons of Samuel would take a bribe and favor the guy who gave the bribe. Can you imagine? The sons of Samuel. And Samuel was the one who told Eli, your sons are corrupt and God's going to judge them. And he saw Eli's sons die. And now his own sons are corrupt. I don't know why he made them judges. But if you want to know the reason for it, turn back to a couple of verses earlier. 1 Samuel 7. Fathers, please remember this. Verse 15. Samuel judged Israel all the days of his life, and he used to always be traveling. Always traveling in God's work. He went to Bethel and Gilgal and Mizpah and judged Israel in all these places. And then once in a while he'd come back to Ramah where his home was there. And he went on his circuit year after year after year after year. And his 2 children grew up corrupt. Now that would not have happened if he had a godly wife. And though it's not written here, I can see that Samuel's wife was not godly like his mother. If Samuel's wife was a godly woman, those 2 sons would not have grown up like that, even if Samuel was traveling 11 months of the year. So much depends on the mother. And at the same time, fathers who spend so many hours at work, be careful that you don't neglect your children. You know, I also had to travel a lot when my children were small. But I would pray for them, and of course, my wife Annie did a great job looking after them. But I always made sure that I would spend time with them. I didn't want them to grow up and say, Daddy was so busy serving the Lord, he had no time for us. Or about you, Daddy was so busy making money, sitting and counting his money and keep checking his bank account, that he had no time for us. And with all your money, your children go to hell, and you may join them there as well. Take these things seriously. Don't play the fool. Lose your children. I want to tell you, my brothers and sisters, the greatest gift God gives you is not a good job. It's not a big house. It's not a great inheritance that you get from rich parents. It's faith. It's humility. It's godliness. If you don't have that and you can't communicate that to your children, I'd say you're pathetic parents. And our goal in this church is to raise up godly parents who will raise up godly children.